Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about data saturation point in qualitative research, also called saturation point in qualitative research. Now, what is a saturation point or data saturation point? This is the point when the data collected for the purposes of your qualitative research is not revealing anything new, or it is not adding any value to your findings, or what it is revealing is the same that has been revealed before. Now, I know that you must have heard of data saturation point, but there are some finer points that you must know about data saturation point. Now, let's say you are collecting data on a certain topic. Now, when do you reach data saturation point? Now, you reach data saturation point is, let's say you have carried out at least 100 or 50 or 60 or 30 or 20 or even 6 or 7 interviews now. And after that, when you are interviewing people, you're asking questions, you are getting the same information as you have got from the previous participants. Now, this is different when you are carrying out one-on-one interviews as compared to when you are carrying out interviews in, let's say, focus groups, or you are observing a lot of participants. So when you collect data on one-on-one basis, the data saturation point is different as compared to when you are collecting data from groups collectively, as in focus groups. So when you have data saturation point on an individual basis or one-on-one interviews, you as a researcher make the decision on when you have reached the data saturation point, because it is you, the researcher, who's collecting the data. You are the best person to decide when the data is saturated or when your data is not giving you anything new or not adding any value. This has to be shown methodically as well to your examiner or reviewer. This is where having the researcher's journal logs or having a reflective journal will come in handy, because there you can show methodically how you reach the data saturation point by collecting data from a number of participants. For this, you also have to remember that it is not only the number of participants you have interviewed, but also how much in-depth research or how much in-depth questioning you have conducted with each participant. Because if you conduct interviews on a surface level where you have not investigated in depth about the participants' perceptions or feelings, or not really extracted all the data that you could in depth from the participant, then you cannot reach data saturation point. You can only reach data saturation point when you have justified to your examiners and reviewers that each participant was involved in an in-depth data collection. So remember, it is not only the number of participants that determine your adequate sample size or determine data saturation point, it is also how in-depth of a study you are carrying out. The second thing you have to remember is when it comes to focus groups, where you are collecting data or interview data on a group or with a group collectively, reaching data saturation point or showing that you've reached data saturation point is not as easy, because when you have a number of participants and you are interviewing them at the same time, you have to be able to show how you made sure that each participant contributed fully to the data collection, because of which you assumed or you reached the conclusion that you reached data saturation point. Because in focus groups or in groups, there will often be participants who will not participate fully, who will be shy, or they will be overshadowed by someone else who is more eager to participate and answer questions. At that point of time, you have to make sure that you received data from each of the participants. You use the group fully, efficiently and effectively. When it comes to data saturation point, there's another thing you have to remember is that the data saturation point or reaching it depends on the topic or the diversity of the area that you are investigating. Let me give you two examples. Let's say that you are investigating the impact of micro credentials on employment. So micro credentials are recognition of a person's skill or competencies and knowledge based on an assessment which is issued to a person. So instead of going through a degree, the participants demonstrates via their past experience or work experience or knowledge competence in a certain field. Let's say it could be communication or problem solving, and they are issued a micro credential for it. Now, what is the impact of having such a micro credential on employment versus having a degree on employment? Let's say this is the topic that you are trying to investigate. Now, when this is such a generalized topic, when you're trying to investigate the impact of micro credential on employment, you may be trying to question employers, holders of micro credential, issuers of micro credential, university partners, and any other stakeholders to grasp the concept or understand the issue from multiple perspectives. Because you have the topic that you have is a very general topic, or you are trying to investigate what are the Australians thinking of the current inflation. What are the Australians thinking of the current inflation? Now, again, this is a general topic. What do you mean by inflation? Do you mean food? Do you mean household items? Do you mean education? If you make it a specific question as to what is the impact of the Australian inflation on the real estate market, then the sample size becomes more narrow, because you are only interviewing people who are influenced or who are impacted by the inflation in the real estate market. So you may only stick to real estate agents and buyers or sellers. But when you have a general question like what is the impact of inflation, or what do Australians have to say about inflation, then you have to get a more broader perspective of the issue. So you may have to have a much broader sample size. Reaching the saturation point will be much harder. Similarly, if you say that I am trying to investigate the impact of micro credentials on employment for teachers or employment for engineers, then you have it narrowed it down. So you are only interviewing engineers. You are studying the impact of micro credential on the engineers' employment, and reaching a saturation point must be much easier. So the more diverse the topic, the more sample size that you have to investigate, the harder it is for you to reach the saturation point. The more justification then you have to provide to your examiner and reviewer on how you reached the saturation point with such a broad topic where such multiple perspectives were sought. At the end of the day, if you can show a methodical and a scientific approach towards reaching the saturation point, where you can show how the responses of the interviewees led to a saturation, led to pretty much revealing the same information repeatedly, you can justify that a saturation point was reached irrespective of a sample size. So you cannot define a particular sample size, although popularly it is always said the wider the sample, the larger the sample, the better it is for qualitative or even quantitative research. And the only reason they do that is because they feel that the lapses where the researcher is not able to extract all the information from a participant can be covered if the sample size is much larger. You can get more information out of the people if you cast a wider net. So I thought it is important for you to know what is saturation point, what are the finer points of it, how do you determine it, and how do you justify to your examiners and reviewers that you have reached the saturation point. Thank you for watching today's video, and bye for now.